Hello there everyone and welcome back to Void War Studios for our Wednesday Age of Sigmar episode. Carrying on with our look into the Daughters of Khaine, we shall be looking at one of their central iconic figures, shrines. Shrines and cauldrons, people, shrines and cauldrons. Cauldrons of blood. And, well, you know. I really love the Witch Elf shrine kind of aesthetics here. If I'm going to be sacrificed on a particular altar, I'd personally rather it be the Altar of Khaine, because that is one badass looking altar. But, you know, if I have a choice, I'd rather not be sacrificed at all. But if I was made to choose, I would prefer this one over a Chaos Shrine, for example, because that kind of thing is just crazy. Cauldrons of Bloods. What are they? Who uses them? Why they uses them? And, you know, all these other kinds of amusing questions I attempt to answer in these episodes, along with a little bit of rules fluff for you to know about how these models work in combat. Anyway, so, Cauldrons of Blood, the Altars of Khaine. The Daughters of Khaine bring forth these great religious icons. Mounted on iron-shod wheels, these mobile shrines grind forward, running over anything in their way, and also being a fantastic place to sacrifice captives. Each cauldron lies heavy with various dark enchantments wrought by Morathi herself, and when the Hag Queen accompanies the altar, she brings the blood within the iron vat to boil. Yes, boiling blood vats. The smell must be absolutely incredible. This boiling effect creates billowing clouds of crimson steam. This crimson mist, as it were, offers strange protections. The Canaanites nearby find themselves able to shrug off wounds that normally would have laid them low, as well as helping them dodge incoming hits more easily. And those who get to drink from this brew find themselves plunged into a drug-addled ecstasy of violence, magnified manyfold by the powers of the Lord of Murder, the god Khaine. Now, Khaine has an interesting history because he is a creation from Warhammer Fantasy, and technically speaking, it died. But Morathi has made a new cult of Khaine in Age of Sigmar, and some piece of him still exists thanks to the Iron Heart. How? Why? No one's entirely sure. This is again one of these kind of rolled over things from Warhammer Fantasy that doesn't entirely make sense, but you know, it's a god. So maybe the Iron Heart was Khaine's backup plan if it, you know, got deaded. But anyway, the fun part of this is that the big iron statues created on the back of the altars come to life. The Altars of Khaine, through various blood rituals, come to life and start roaring and pouring molten metal blood from every single joint. It swings a massive sword that basically hacks everything around it, and yeah, it fights to protect the shrine and also to murder everything in sight. It is a walking construct in the likeness of Khaine. Each temple to the witch cults, the Daughters of Khaine cults, have one of these shrines. They are prized relics, irreplaceable, and the cauldrons themselves, created by Morathi, although she claims they were gifts from Khaine, these are creations of her own working. More lies from Morathi. Of course, the cauldrons never overflow, and they never empty. No matter how much blood is poured in, they never ever overflow. The Canaanites assume that this is due to their god's magic, and the god taking some of the offering away. However, Morathi knows better. She siphons off this magical power back into herself, into the mother of all cauldrons, a master cauldron if you were, called the Mathkui. She uses this to absorb the power from the worship of her Canaanite cults, drawing from them energy and power and, well, empowering herself. I've said power a lot, haven't I? But this is Morathi. She does love her power. And these shrines are really dangerous to be anywhere near. Now, excluding the fact that you can have either what is known as a Hag Queen or a Slaughter Queen riding atop of one of these things, praising Khaine and, you know, offering sacrifices wherever she can, these are the basic stats of your wonderful, wonderful Cauldron of Blood. It has 13 wounds, 8 bravery and a 5+ save. It can move up to 6 inches a turn so long as it's not damaged, and it has an incredible number of fun little abilities, including a missile weapon known as Torrent of Burning Blood. Basically, this bloody mist leaps out from the altar and, well, melts your eyes and your skin. 6 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, with -1 rend and 1 damage. Not half bad in the slightest. But it's in melee that this thing is not only amazing, but also when it's close to other Canaanite worshippers. In combat, your witch elves riding the thing have their sacrificial knives, typically 8, with 3s to hit and 4s to wound with 1 damage. Your hag queen, or slaughter queen, of course, have their own attacks, which I will get to in a separate video, as we are talking predominantly about shrines here. And the Avatar of Khaine, whilst attached to this thing, has 4 attacks, with its sword, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, -2 rend, and 3 damage a pop. That is quite tasty. And here are its abilities. Bladed Impact. You roll a dice if this model ends a charge within an inch of an enemy unit. On a 2+, that unit takes D3 mortal wounds, so impact hits. Fun times. Blood Shield. I hadn't talked about this yet. Whilst this thing is unwounded, the blood shield extends for 18 inches around the altar. And here's what it does. You add 1 to saving throws for Daughters of Khaine for units that are wholly within range. This effect doesn't stack. So only 1 cauldron can affect Daughters of Khaine around it. So your 6+ save became a 5+, which shields becomes a 4+, and suddenly your Daughters of Khaine are looking a bit more tanky than they were to begin with. It's not a terrible save, especially when you could dish out so many attacks. And 18 inches is a nice bubble. Even if you have large units of witch elves, you can comfortably cover at least 2 of them. The Witch's Brew, the cauldron itself. In your hero phase, you can pick a Daughter of Khaine unit within 3 inches, and it drinks the Witch Brew from the Cauldron of Blood. If you do so, until your next hero phase, you can reroll failed wounds. You never need to take a battle shock test for the rest of the round, until your next turn. So yeah, that's pretty damn fun. Not only do your Daughters of Khaine have a much improved save, but they're also rerolling wounds. And if you take double daggers, that's... oh dear God, that's just potentially unkind. And then of course you have the Priestess of Khaine, who has... essentially they have the same prayer, known as the Rune of Khaine and the Touch of Death. The Rune of Khaine means that the special character riding this thing gets to add D3 to their damage instead of 1, so long as the prayer goes off on a 3+. Touch of Death, you can pick a unit within 3 inches, and you hide a dice in one of your hands. Your opponent must pick the hand, and if the hand they pick is the one holding the dice, the unit that you targeted takes D3 mortal wounds. A little fun little gaming mechanic there. You basically pray you don't find the dice in your opponent's hand. And last, Wrath of Khaine, the lovely iron statue on the back, which can occasionally just jump off and decide to start hitting things. If your army includes any Avatars of Khaine, friendly Daughters of Khaine priests know the Wrath of Khaine prayer in addition to any other prayers they know. And the Wrath of Khaine spell, prayer I should say, allows you to animate. Now, when you animate, this is what happens. The model no longer can use its torrent of burning blood, that wonderful blood that was spraying all out of the various joints and orifices and mouth of the altar of Khaine, and instead the statue becomes its own entity. That torrent of burning blood that you've now lost on your altar of Khaine is now firmly attached to your lovely walking avatar, who goes around hitting things with the sword and, well, vomiting blood that just burns everyone away. This creation has a bravery of 10, 9 wounds, 9 movement, and 4+ save. It keeps the stats as I mentioned earlier for Torrent of Burning Blood and the Sword of Khaine. In addition to this, it's counted as what is called an Idol of Worship. This special rule means that you add 1 to bravery characteristics for all Daughters of Khaine within 7 inches of this wonderful avatar. This thing is frankly hilarious, especially for its ability to detach itself and just go wander off hitting things. It gives you a little bit more utility, and if you have to out-muscle someone, being able to wander off from your altar and go smash things whilst the altar stays back and buffs everyone else, that's a pretty handy trade-off. The other variation on the lovely classic The Altar of Khaine is known as a Blood-Rack Shrine, and sat on top of these wonderful mirrors and sat on top of these wonderful things are known as Blood-Rack Medusae. These were once witch elves, just like all the rest. They were bitten by Morathi, and an exchange of power was created. A portion of Morathi's strength and magic and blood went into the witch elf, warping it, changing it, cursing it, creating this new form of a Medusae. It is an agonizing transformation, and one that tethers this witch elf to Morathi for the rest of its life. These blood-rack Medusae wield sorcerous powers, and their eyes have the ability to cause death to any who they lock on. Those selected for this ritual, known as the Slith Onir, a special venom from Morathi that is bitten into them, are sometimes rising champions from their various witch cults, or people of note within the witch cults themselves. Some, however, are chosen because of their contemptuous opinions over Morathi's structures, over how she rules, but once they are bitten and the venom works its magic, these Medusae no longer have any real will of their own. They become Morathi's most loyal and faithful servants until the day they die. Now, you can have your blood-rack Medusae on, well, tail, I should say on foot, but on tail seems more appropriate, and it goes around as a character, which I will talk about in the proper character video, but the most favoured way they like to travel around is on a blood-rack shrine. These shrines are propelled by unseen magics on their great big steel wheels, and they crash forward into the enemy lines. 2 shrine guards, armed with long spears, strike out at anyone who gets too close, and the Medusae on top uses a weapon known as a whisper claw. However, as dangerous as the elves and Medusae are on the shrine, it is the Medusae and her eyes and the mirror shining behind her that makes it truly terrifying. This mirror, known as a Scathmere, reflects the blood-rack Medusae's eyes. Those who stare upon this mirror or upon the Medusae herself are exsanguinated from the inside out, causes all the blood from the victim to drain out, to make them wither and die on the spot. And the mirror allows this effect to not only hit more than one target, but to hit potentially hundreds of people, all suddenly losing all blood in their veins and collapsing to the ground dead. Blood-rack shrines are quite different entities from the Daughters of Khaine. Whilst they share a similar profile in that they have the 13 wounds, 8 bravery, 5+ save, and a movement of 6 inches, a lot of the other weapon options are changed. For example, there is no longer any Crimson Mist killing you, there is the blood-rack stare, the thing that the lovely mirror helps project onto you. And it has a 10-inch range, and when unhurt, this stare has the following capabilities. You pick a unit that is within visual range of this, and you roll a dice for every model that is within range. On a 3+, that model takes 1 mortal wound. So yeah, that's a pretty terrifying missile weapon in and of itself, because yeah, on a 3+, everybody takes a mortal wound. That's potentially half the unit wiped out. That's bad news bears. And then we go to the melee weapons, which include Tail of Serpents, basically the Medusae on top whacking people with her tail, which is D6 attacks, hitting on 4s, wounding on 4s, and 1 damage apiece. The Whisper Claw, which is 4 attacks that hit on 4s and wound on 3s with 1 damage apiece. The Blood-rack Spear, which is 2 attacks, hitting on 3s, wounding on 3s, -1 rend and D3 damage. And then you've got the Shrine Keepers with their goad staves, or spear-like things, which have 6 attacks when not harmed, with a profile of hitting and wounding on 3s and 1 damage. And as for its abilities, they are several. No prayers, but you have the Bladed Impact for that lovely 2+ causing D3 wounds when you charge something, and you have what is called instead an Aura of Agony. This is to represent that the shrine emits an aura of agonizing waves that hits targets that aren't prepared for it and can cause them to clutch over and fall over, well, in pain or dead. You roll a dice for enemy units within 7 inches of this model. If the dice roll equals or bests the score listed on the damage table for the model, the unit suffers D3 mortal wounds. Now, what this means is, when this thing is not wounded on a 2+, that unit takes D3 mortal wounds. So yeah, you've got the Blood-rack Stare that's basically wiping out half of a unit it targets, and then you get to do a further D3 on a 2+. Yeah, when unharmed, this thing is frickin' terrifying. And instead of prayers, it does have a spell, because the Bloodwrack Medusae is a sorceress after all. It can of course attempt to cast the normal things, the Arcane Bolt, the Mystic Shield, but it also has Enfeebling Foe. It's cast on a 5, and you pick a target within 18 inches if successful. Until the next hero phase, you subtract 1 from wound rolls for that unit in the combat phase. So yeah, that model suddenly becomes really unlucky, because if it's trying to hurt you, it's suddenly having a harder time doing it. A great way to screw over a weaker hero, or just to make life hard for everybody. Yeah, that's a very unpleasant spell to be hit by. And the Bloodwrack Shrine is a fantastic, weird to phrase it like this, but it's a fantastic shooting shrine. Basically, you put your Altar of Khaine right up the middle, you smash it into the enemy, you then drop off your avatar, who then wanders around killing things, making sure your Altar of Khaine can still buff your other units and not get hurt. And in the meantime, your Bloodwrack Medusae is behind this thing, basically making every enemy unit fall down dead from agonizing pain, from blood loss, from all kinds of unpleasantness. I would suggest keeping the Bloodwrack Shrine slightly further back, but otherwise it's still quite capable of dealing some serious damage in melee. It's just that the Shrine of Khaine is more geared towards the actual choppy. Whereas that Bloodwrack stare is just horrifying, and the ability to do all these mortal wounds is, again, just horrifying. I hope you've enjoyed this little video about the witch elves and their love of shrines, gutting and killing things and sacrificing them, and Morathi's never-ending plans to become more and more powerful and godlike, which seem to be coming to fruition thanks to the Morathi stuff that's been happening in Broken Realms. So I hope you've all enjoyed this. Thank you all for watching, and I hope to hear from you all soon. Please check out the Facebook page, check me out on Instagram, and like and subscribe. Feel free to look at the Patreon page, as that would be really appreciated, and have a wonderful day. Take care, everyone.